Hello and welcome to Craftsy. My name is Leah and we have been here celebrating National Craft Month. And today we are here with ZJ Humbach for No More Excuses. So a little bit from me before we dig into ZJ's presentation. We do have a chat box for you that should be below the video viewer. We're also streaming live on YouTube and Facebook, and you can use the chat there as well. If you have any questions as they come in, you can place those into the chat box, and if we have time, I'll get to some of those for ZJ before we have to say goodbye. You can also use that chat box to just let us know if there are any things that ZJ says throughout today's presentation that really ring true for you, or if you have any comments of your own that you'd like to share with your other crafters that are in the chat box as well. Now you can already see her, but I would like to give her the proper presentation. This is ZJ Humbach. She is a professional quilter and long arm quilter for 20 years. She's got a Master of Arts teaching degree with an emphasis in adult education and curriculum development. She's a former editor for Quilter's Newsletter magazine, a technical editor for 2 long arm quilting books, a freelance writer for several quilting magazines, and a presenter for TN Marketing, sewing, quilting, and serging videos. So that is an extensive list. We're very excited to have her expertise here today. ZJ, welcome. I know we've got you here to talk with us about getting beyond the excuses of having no time or budget for quilting. So I'd love for you to just get us right into it.
Well, Leah, I'm very glad to be here today. And I think a lack of time and budget affects all of us, especially in today's economy and as busy as we all are. It affects most facets of our life. And sadly, I think a lot of us relegate quilting to a lower priority or even to the back burner, and we just never get around to it for so many different reasons or, excuses. I know it was especially true for me when I was in the Air Force and I was juggling a demanding career. I had 2 boys that were active in competition hockey, competition soccer. I met myself coming and going. What can I say? So even though sewing and quilting were my stress releases, it seemed like fabric always came in well behind a new pair of skates, and quilting just got squeezed in, whatever.
So at that point, what would you say your breakthrough moment was there?
Oh my gosh. I'd always been a sewer for years, ever since I was in grade school. But I'd always wanted to learn to quilt, and had just never gotten around to it. Well, when I was stationed in Little Rock Air Force Base, Arkansas, there was another female officer in my unit, and son of a gun, she was a prolific quilter. And we went out to lunch one day and got talking. I said, oh my God, I've always wanted to learn to quilt. She goes, well, let's do it. Like, no more excuses. So I said, okay. She said, well, we're having lunch tomorrow. We're going to go to Joann's, because in that little town there was no quilt shops. And this was back in the 90s when there wasn't a lot of quilt shops available. It wasn't quite the rage that it is now. So we went out. I bought a bunch of fabric. She got me some Eleanor Burns Quilt in a Day books. I think it was the Trip Around the World and Log Cabin. It was right before Christmas. Got all the tools. Walked into my boss and said, I need leave. He goes, what? I said, I need a week of leave. I got to make some Christmas gifts. It was great. And he said, okay, see you in a week. So I filled out my forms and I got hooked. Oh my God, hook, line, and sinker. But I still relegated to the back burner because we were busy. Mm-hmm. Well, next I was stationed up in Canada on an exchange tour, so hockey came roaring back into our lives, and time became even more scarce. And it was like, I got to do something here. Life is passing me by for quilting. So I had taught leadership management and communication skills for Air Force ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps, and also at the Officer Training School for about a third of my career. I was in for almost 26 years. And one day the aha light went on that I needed to apply those same principles of management to my quilting.
So that seems a little bit complex when just on the face of it. So how does management relate to quilting? They feel a little different on the face.
I know it sounds that way, but it really isn't. It's all about working smarter, not harder. It's about getting it done.
That actually brings me to a great place to jump in and say, I know ZJ doesn't want any of us to have to work too hard, so she has actually put together something for you to follow along with, right, ZJ?
Oh, yeah.
Perfect.
We've got a download of all the slides. I don't want you taking notes. I just want this to be relaxed. I want it to spark ideas for you and just be an hour for you.
Yes, so perfect. You're going to find that download in a couple of places. You can see on the screen that you can jump into the description of the video and you'll find it there. You can also go into the chat box. Our team is usually really good about making sure that all of your links that you need are available for you in the chat box as well. So that's what we're going to be using, and that's what ZJ is going to be featuring this entire discussion off of, and you can just pop that up, no notes needed. It's all right there for you. And we are going to jump in. I believe we're just going to call it Principles of Management. Jump right into the first slide. And ZJ, if you can talk to us about what we're going to be seeing on the screen, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. The first slide here is an easy acronym that I used to teach my trainees called 3M Scotch Tape. This applies to Management 101 that you will learn in any management course in college. And every manager out there has to manage money, manpower, materials, space, and time. And you should be able to see that there on the first slide. You have to control these as an effective manager for any project you have because it helps you work efficiently and effectively. In other words, work smarter, not harder. So here's a few things I learned about 3M Scotch Tape and quilting to answer Leah's question there. So if we could have slide 2 there, Leah. I'm not able to see it on the screen, so I'm just hoping you're putting them up for me. When it comes to money, let's face it, unless we're Bill Gates or somebody like that, we all have limited funds, and we have to figure out where we're going to spend our dollars. So the first thing I want you to do is add quilting as a line item to your budget. Yes, you need to have a budget, but I won't go down that path. I feel like I'm beating my head when I talk to my kids about budgets. So put quilting in as a line item. You need, as a quilting manager, you need to plan for quilting in your life. This is something you just have to say, I am going to plan to quilt. So I want to make sure you have funds for it. You may not use those funds this month, but you can put them in a separate account, or you can take actual dollars and put them in an envelope or whatever, but you've got money for quilting. Now, I know time or money is tight for most of us. So where can we find money? Well, interestingly enough, the cost of a latte is about the same as fat quarter. So why not swap a couple of lattes for fat quarters? Okay, what else can you maybe give up? Maybe you pack a lunch for work 1 or 2 days a week and put those pennies, quarters, nickels, dimes, dollars into your jar, and now you've got money for fabric or tools. So the other things you can do if you don't want to give things up, or if you just honestly can't find any more give in your budget, which I realize is true for a lot of people. We are tight. So let's look at using those coupons at the different hobby stores, especially for larger items like batting. Buy your holiday fabrics at the end of the season for next year. The themes really don't change that much, and you will save a fairly good amount that way. Thrift stores actually have quite a bit of fabric for when people clear out and say, I'm not going to do this project, or I'm tired of this fabric, or whatever. You'd be surprised how much you'll find there. Same with going to estate sales and garage sales. I really pity the poor husbands trying to clear out an estate or the kids after mom has died, and there's all this fabric. What do we do with it? It's going to be at the estate sales and the garage sales. And the cost of cotton has just gone up tremendously in the last, even 5 to 10 years, but especially in the last few. So if you can find high quality fabric at one of these sales, and tools, rulers, rotary cutters. You'd be surprised what you'll find, and it's in very, very good condition or even new. When all else fails, swap fabric with your friends. When I go over to some of my friends' houses, I look at it, it's like, oh my God, I want to come shop in your stash because they have so many different fabrics that I don't have. So swap fabric or have a fabric swap at your quilt guild. And the last option, work at a quilt shop part-time or at a hobby store. You're going to get an employee's discount. And that's a great way to say, okay, my work at this store is going strictly for my quilting, which, these are all just simple things, but it all adds up. And as my mother would say, pennies make the dollars, and the dollars are what buy you fabric.
Amazing. I can already see in the chat some people are putting in their own tips as well. So keep those coming in as usual. I will be keeping an eye on that, and we'll get some questions in towards the end if we have time, just in case you missed the top of the hour. Now, ZJ, I want to get back to your presentation here. So you just covered the first M, money, but what about the second M of the three M's, manpower? How does that affect quilting?
Well, before I go into manpower, I do want to say, you said comments are coming in the management world. This is what we call brainstorming. 2 heads are better than 1, 3 are better than 2. And the more we can brainstorm and look at these comments, you'd be surprised how we're going to find even more ways to save money and budget for our favorite hobby. So I think this is great that everybody's participating. Now, when it comes to manpower, we think, wait a minute, manpower, what are you talking about, ZJ? There's only one of me when it comes time to quilt. Well, guess what? It's not. First of all, you are the most important factor here. So I want you to know yourself. You need to sit back and say, okay, how do I work best? Do I like a messy studio where things are flung around and I'll just see a spark of inspiration and grab that piece of fabric and go? I can't tell you how many professional quilters I've gone in, and that quilting studio, I'm sorry, it's a disaster. It is piles of fabric, but they know where everything is, and that's how they work best. Or maybe you're somebody that needs to be nice and organized and a place for everything and everything in its place, as my mom would say. Or maybe your combination. So evaluate, how do you work best? You also need to know, when do you work best? And are you a morning person? Are you an evening person? Some people I know, they get up an extra hour early just to quilt or just to do their planning or whatever. Other people, they, like me, we stay up late, and that's when we work best. So that's the first thing, is evaluate yourself as your manpower. You also have more manpower. You have people around you, most likely, if you're married and have kids, you can delegate tasks. There's a lot of chores at home. Put those kiddos to work. They can help out. Husband can empty the dishwasher. He can give the kids a bath, whatever it may be. Work it out so that you get some time to quilt. Now, when it comes to the actual quilting, it's not all just you. You have options. You can, when it comes to quilting, you can quilt by hand, quilt by machine, or quilt by checkbook, as we call it. And that applies more to the actual quilting after you've got it pieced. But before you get to that, you've got to do a quilt sandwich. You've got to lay out the backing, the lining, or the backing, whichever you prefer to call it. You have to lay in your batting and then your top. And most people do it on the floor, on a ping pong table. And it's probably, to me, one of the worst things that you have to do with quilting, trying to get it flat, trying to get it pinned, trying to get it straight. Stop the madness. Go find your local long arm quilter, and many of them are more than happy to throw that puppy onto the machine and baste it for you with about a 3-inch long, 2.5 to 3-inch long, maybe even longer basting stitch, about 3 inches apart, just like you do all the pinning, and give it back to you, and it doesn't cost that much. Now you can take it home and quilt it by hand or quilt by machine. And I had quite a few clients that did that with me, and I never did quilting for them at all. I just did the sandwich and the basting. Obviously, you can send out the quilting. I had a lot of clients that they like to do the baby quilts and the lap quilts under their machine, or they had like a handy quilter. That's great. But for the bigger quilts, especially the queens and kings, send them over to the long armor and let them worry about it. It will be so much less frustration, and I think you'll be really pleased with the results. There's nothing that says you have to do it all. There really isn't. There's no quilting police. So if this makes your workload easier, go for it. A lot of long armors will be more than happy to put the binding on for you and have it all set for you to hand stitch or even machine stitch it down. I do majority of my own personal quilts with a machine finish binding rather than hand stitch. One, I hate to do hand work. Hand is a four-letter word to me, and I try and avoid it. I'm more about speed and getting things done. And a lot of the quilts that I'm doing are for grandkids or for my sons, and they get used. They're utility quilts. So I want a durable binding, and I find the hand stitching works best. The other thing you can do is sometimes, even though we love to quilt, it's hard to get motivated. It really is. So use quilting as a motivator. If I get the laundry done, if I get that drawer organized, I can go quilt. I can give myself half an hour to quilt. That's my carrot. So use quilting as a motivation. So manpower is definitely part of quilting, which leads us into materials. For the last M, when it comes to materials, I want to save you frustration. I want you to buy quality fabric, the best fabric you can buy, because it will be definitely on the straight of grain. It's not going to, it's going to lay flatter. It's not going to give you wavy edges. It's going to last longer. And for all the time and money and effort that you put into a quilt, and it's going to last hopefully for quite a few years, you need to buy quality fabric. You need to organize it in some way, shape, or form. And again, this goes back to knowing yourself as manpower. How do you work? Do you like to organize and see things by color? Is it better for you to have it organized by type of fabric, cottons, homespuns, linens, whatever, because we can put different types of fabrics besides cotton in our quilts? Do you like it organized by themes like holidays and kids and geometrics and solids? However it works for you, get it organized. Maybe it's by separating fats from the yardage, from the scraps. I don't know. Think about it, get it organized. Keep it visible. This is key. Keep your materials visible, because the more they're out, the more you're going to have inspiration. If you hide them back in a closet and always have the door shut, or they're just in boxes, it's not going to do anything to spark your creativity or imagination. I also want you to think out of the box. Material's expensive. So let's look at some alternate materials that you can use. T-shirts. Oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many T-shirts I have from all the hockey tournaments. And they turned into great quilts. A lot of my clients would bring me T-shirt quilts that they put together from their kids growing up, all their T-shirts. And it was a high school graduation gift. And the kids loved it in college because they're soft. T-shirts are wonderful to wrap in. I mean, we've got T-shirt sheets. Why not have the T-shirt quilt? You can also use baby and kids clothes. It's a wonderful gift because the children grow so quickly, to collect some of those clothes from the first through 3 years, or whatever age group you want, and put them into a nice little memory quilt, into a nice lap quilt. So that's another use of it. I've seen a lot of people use men's ties and make some beautiful quilts for like a retirement gift, or for a dad for Father's Day. Men's shirts are wonderful sources if you look for plaids and a homespun material, and homespun quilts are delightful. So again, look at those thrift shops, look at the garage sales, and look for those men's shirts. I also want you to consider pre-cuts, and we're going to talk about those at length a little bit later in the program. But if you can save time cutting things out, that's a huge boost for your quilting. So we're going to talk about pre-cuts in a little bit, so hold that thought.
All right, so that seems to be our 3 M's. Now we've got to get into the Scotch tape. So first we have the S. So how does S, space, come into this whole picture? Most of us, of course, only have a limited place in our homes to use.
Well, I don't literally want you using Scotch tape in your quilts, but when it comes to space and time, these are a couple of critical areas. Time and money are the 2 biggest ones, but space gets overlooked, and it's a critical component. It should be inviting and practical. If your space isn't inviting, you're not going to go in there. You're going to close the door and walk away. Now, I've quilted in, I can't tell you how many different spaces, from the kitchen table to, in Canada, I had literally a closet that I quilted in. It was a long kind of hallway walk-in closet in the basement that I made into my sewing area, to a space in a laundry room in Arkansas, to finally having an actual quilting room, a room that was dedicated to quilting. Oh my God, I thought I died and gone to heaven when I got to Colorado for assignments. So, you know, your space is critical, but whatever it is, you need to make it inviting, and you need to make it practical, especially if you're like me and had to use the kitchen table a lot of times. You've got to have an easy way to move things in and out and clear space so you can have dinner. So evaluate your space and really look at it to an eye to, what can I do with what I've got? How can I make it better? And the first thing I'm going to say is streamline and declutter. There's a lot of junk that we don't need. There's a lot of projects you're never going to finish. There's a lot of tools that you bought them because it sounded good at the time. Oh my God, I can't tell you how many templates I bought. And I've never been a template quilter, but everybody told me, you need these templates. I look at them now and say, why? So get rid of them. Then get organized. I want you to organize by function. That's the easiest way, kind of like your kitchen, where we have the kitchen triangle of the stove, the refrigerator, and the sink. That forms our efficient triangle. I want you to do the same thing. I want you to group like items. For instance, at my cutting table, that's one area. And there I group, my rulers, my rotary cutters, everything, my marking pens, everything I need for that area, I've grouped like items. And that leads into workstations. You're probably going to need a place to press. You're going to need a place for the sewing, and you need a place to cut. And you may have more areas. You may have an embroidery area. You may have a serging area. So look at your workstations, and then look at your tools and consider point of use. When you look at a tool, think, where do I use this? For instance, snips. I can't tell you how many pairs of snips I had. I evaluated those tools and said, I need multiples. So I had snips at the long arm. I have snips at the sewing machine. I have snips at the serger. I even have a pair of snips at my cutting table. Same with rulers. Certain rulers, I've got them not only at the cutting table, but I've got a couple special rulers right at the sewing machine. I also want you to, again, organize by how you prefer to work. Do you want that ironing board right next to the sewing machine? Do you want it near the cutting table? Well, where's best for you? I've kind of got it off to the side of my cutting table, one, because that's the place where I had space for it, but I can also turn it and butt it up right next to the cutting table. And now those yards of fabric that I need to press like backing fabric or even the quilt, I can lay it on the cutting table and pull it onto the ironing board as I need it. So think about how you work, think about the functions. And now again, oh my God, did I put pre-cuts on there?
I
I think
think
that one got in there.
ZJ, what I can see here is that we're just about to move into how efficient space can save time every time. I think that's
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So yeah, the efficient. I think somebody got a line in there that they weren't supposed to that I didn't catch. Okay, so efficient space saves time each and every time that you go in, and that's why your space is so important. Now, how do I find time to quilt? Well, time is the most precious resource of all. I started putting quilting on my calendar at work, on my calendar at home. And the only thing that would preempt it was a true bona fide emergency. I'm quilting. Or if all of a sudden, okay, the hockey practice got changed, that's kind of an emergency. All right, I'll move it. But it had to be a pretty serious reason for me to preempt it. I also, for a lot of people, they find that there's just too many demands at home. So they need to get away. So look for a quilting retreat and put that on your calendar. Again, you've budgeted the money. Go ahead and spend it. Use it to get away. I have a girlfriend that her way of getting away is she will book a hotel at a week for a weekend all to herself, take her sewing stuff, and she goes and sews in the hotel. So if you really want to use your time, you can do it. You just have to plan for it. And speaking of planning, I want you to always allot time for planning. I need you to evaluate your project before you even get started. This will help you be successful. Okay, do you have a deadline? If so, that's the first thing. You may be making a quilt for a shower or for a wedding gift or a baby gift. So get that deadline up there before you even choose a pattern, before you even think about making this quilt. The other thing I want you to do is read the pattern first. I cannot foot stomp that enough as a teacher. Read the pattern first. It's like reading the recipe to make sure you've got everything you need. So first thing, I want you to look at how intricate is it. I made the mistake many years ago. I found this gorgeous pattern and I was so excited to make it. And I didn't read it first. And I just bought what I needed and got into it. And it ended up that it had finished squares of 3/4 of an inch. Do you know how small 3/4 of an inch squares are? There were 128 of those puppies in each block, times 20 blocks. It was a very painful quilt to do, but I was stubborn enough that I wasn't going to let it defeat me. Worst of all, I got the bright idea. Wow, my serger does a beautiful 3/4 inch or 1/4 inch seam. I won't have raveled edges. It'll be fast. Let's serge this. Wrong answer, because I sewed one strip wrong in the wrong place, and then all of them were off, and I ended up having to tear out those little tiny patches to make it right. And by the time I got done, I was so mad at it, I was ready to throw it up in the air, so I named it the confetti quilt. So I learned a very valuable lesson. Evaluate how intricate the quilt is, and then look at the best way to accomplish it. What methods of sewing am I going to use? What types of materials? And then check your supplies to make sure you've got everything you need. Estimate how long it's going to take. Do you really want to dedicate that amount of time to this particular quilt? And most importantly, will you enjoy it? If you aren't going to enjoy doing it, don't do it. Please don't do it. It's not worth it. This is supposed to be fun. It's not I have to do this to survive. It's, I'm doing this because I enjoy it. But wait, there's more. There's more to time. I want you to then, after you've evaluated it, break it into manageable parts. break down this project just like a good project manager does. And I want you to set aside 15 minutes a day. I had a friend of mine who was on, her son was on the same hockey team as one of my boys. And she was a nurse here in Denver. And I said, how the heck do you find time to quilt? Because she had quilts all over her house. She said, every day my family knows, do not disturb. This is mom's time. I go in my sewing room, I close the door, I set a timer, and I quilt for 15 minutes a day. 15 minutes, that's hardly anything. How do you get anything done? She said it all adds up. I can evaluate a pattern. I can cut out pieces. I can do some hand stitching. I can pin a binding. I can sew some patches together. 15 minutes. And if all is going well and I'm having fun and the family doesn't need me, guess what? It might be a half an hour. It might be an hour. So just do something because it all adds up.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that we can do to save time as we work?
Absolutely. It all goes back to being your own project manager. You're the one that has to bring this project in on time and on budget. So again, I want you working smarter, not harder. And one of the best ways to do this is to simplify every project. The best thing to do is look for patterns where you don't have to match points, where the piecing is offset, or you're using strips like horizontal quilts. There's lots of different things you can do. I try to avoid triangles and hexagons. Those are a lot more tedious to match and to get the points perfect. Squares and rectangles are your friends, as are large print patches. They can take up a lot of space and be easy to work with. Sashing will make it that you don't have to match all the points on a block. You can also use bigger blocks so you have less blocks in the quilt. Maybe instead of doing a 6-inch block, you do the math and turn it into a 12-inch block. Now you're only using half as many blocks. You can use less blocks, but you can add borders. Same size block, but just add some borders onto the quilt. That saves a lot of time. Strip piecing is a godsend, and it makes things go faster, where you piece long strips together and then cut them into the size patches that you need. As I said before, machine finish bindings. You can finish a binding on the machine a lot faster than you can by hand. Another thing that I meant to mention before about manpower is a lot of times there are people, I have clients, they love to do the handwork, absolutely love it. So maybe you can swap with a friend. I have a friend who has arthritis very badly, and so I'll cut her patches out for her. I'll do all her cutting and the rotary cutting, and then she'll do the binding for me, do the hand binding. So there's lots of ways to save time. And then we're back to pre-cuts. This term keeps coming up, pre-cuts.
It sure does. It looks like they can turn out to be a huge time saver. And ZJ, I know you've got a wonderfully in-depth class on pre-cuts. It's called All About Pre-Cuts. And we would like to take a look at a quick clip from that class so that people can understand exactly what you're talking about with these pre-cuts that we love so much.
Okie doke.
I want you to know as much as possible about pre-cuts because they're a lot of fun, they're addicting, and they really are going to take your quilting to a whole new level. As you can see, pre-cuts are what they sound like. They are pre-cut fabric that are either squares or strips that have been packaged into groups. They typically are an assortment of fabrics from a collection or a line of fabrics, and it can be either a single color, such as this jelly roll where they're all black strips. They can be from a collection of prints, such as the layer cakes over here. It can be solids, or rather this one is a tone on tone, which is really ideal for your quilts. It can be batiks, such as this little pack of Tonga treats. These are just as yummy as can be. Everybody loves batiks. It can be holiday themed, such as this jelly roll. This is for the Christmas holidays. It can be, I've seen Halloween ones, it can be kids fabrics. If there's a fabric out there, literally, there's going to be a pre-cut for it, and that's what makes them so fun. I really like them because it allows me to sample different fabrics without making a huge investment or standing there and waiting at the fabric shop while they cut little pieces of yardage off, 10 different fabrics that I've, juggled into the store and over to the counter. I can just grab a jelly roll, I can grab a layer cake, and I'm off and running.
All right, that is the clip again from the class all about pre-cuts. It is taught by ZJ here. And if you would like to check out more of that class for yourself, there is a link that has been dropped into the chat box. You can check that out. Just sign into your Craftsy account or become a premium Craftsy member, and you'll be able to view that full class all about pre-cuts. All right, ZJ, back to you.
Well, I find that pre-cuts really are the ultimate solution to creating gorgeous quilts without sacrificing time or breaking the bank. The type of pre-cuts just seems to keep growing and growing. As you can see by this chart here, each manufacturer has a specific trademark name for their pre-cuts. Moda kind of started this revolution of the pre-cut, so they are the ones that we generically refer to a tissue as Kleenex. Well, we refer to a strip of fabric, strips of fabric that are in a roll as a jelly roll. Well, that's Moda's specific name, but other manufacturers have different names for that jelly roll. So I just want you to be aware of that. If you look at the chart, there are so many different pre-cuts. In the yellow, these are pieces that are from a half width of fabric, 21 inches, which would be your fat quarter, your fat eighth, or your fat 16th. And you can buy those usually singly, or sometimes they're in a pack. You can pick up a pack of fat quarters or fat eighths, fat 16ths. But I didn't put pieces there because there's no real standard for it. But these are ones you can buy singly. In green, you'll see our total width of fabric cuts. These are cut all the way across the width of the fabric. And there's several different ones. You have the dessert roll, which is a 5-inch wide strip that you can find. Tonga treats, those yummy little batiks that you saw in the video clip there, they're a 6-inch wide. And then you've got the jelly roll and the honey buns. The jelly roll is extremely versatile and is one of my favorites. And like I said, it is wonderful. They recently came out a few years ago with a pack of just one fabric in the roll that is great for bindings and for sashing. And the rest of those in the pink are your specific cuts, the specialty cuts. And you can see that you can get a 10 by 10 in the layer cake. You've got the charms, which are 5 by 5. The mini charms are your 2.5-inch squares. And then you have some very specialty cuts that are by Moda, that are the honeycombs, which are hexagons, and turnovers, which are half square triangles. Little harder to find, but they are out there. These are unfinished sizes, and you need to keep that in mind as you start looking at using these. Now, jelly rolls, mini charms, charm packs, and layer cakes are all multiples of 2.5 inches.
I know we've got a photo coming for you here.
Yeah, thank you. So you can see these. There's your layer cake to the left. In the center are the charms, and all the way to the right are the mini charms and the um, jelly roll. The jelly roll and the mini charms work all day long. They are my favorites. They marry up so perfectly, and they're great for sewing around the edges of those larger squares, like your layer cake, to frame it out. You can do a sashing with cornerstones. They're very, very versatile. But I want you to look closely. Even though these are multiples of 2.5, we're going to have a problem here because the other ones require special handling.
We've got another photo coming for those.
Yeah. What we forget about is the seam allowance. So when you're evaluating your quilt and saying, "Oh, yeah, I can use these as patches," you have to realize when you sew those 2.5-inch charms or mini charms together, you're losing a 1/2 inch. So that unfinished unit is actually going to be 4.5 inches unfinished. And if you try and pair it up against the 5-inch square, it's not going to work. You are going to have to trim your square. The same for the 10-inch layer cake. You have to fit or trim the larger square to fit the pieced units.
Ah, I see. So with that in mind, CJ, what are some of the advantages of using these pre-cuts as you go?
Well, I know it sounds like, oh my God, I'm going to have to start trimming. Why are they pre-cut? What am I gaining? Well, there really are advantages. The pre-cut advantages, number one, it's precision. These are laser cut, computer guided cutting for these. So every piece is absolutely perfect, which means you're going to be more apt to have a precisely pieced quilt as long as your seam allowances are precise. It saves time. You aren't having to cut all these little tiny 2.5-inch squares out or whatever size you're using. The biggest thing for me is you don't have to pre-wash them. Now, they are not pre-shrunk. There's a difference. But I am going to foot stomp here. Do not pre-wash these. No matter how tempted you are, do not pre-wash, or rather wash pre-cuts. They will ravel like crazy in the washing machine. You're going to have to try and press them, and it defeats the whole purpose. Pre-cuts are cuts so they shouldn't ravel, or they usually will have a teeny tiny pinked edge, or if they don't and it's a straight edge, it will be very minimal raveling. So never do pre-washing. Wait until after the entire quilt is finished and then pre-wash it. Don't be pre-washing the batting or the bind. Try again. The backing, the binding fabric, your borders. Don't do it because it won't shrink consistently and you won't be happy with the results. As I said in the clip, it does allow you to sample multiple fabrics inexpensively because most manufacturers in their pack are doing it from an entire collection. They're also very portable and easy to store. They're great. You just grab and go.
And I know we're going to move right into some of the beauty of pre-cuts. So when we're talking about what we really love about them, what would you elaborate on in terms of pre-cuts?
They're versatile. That's the big thing. I find they're very versatile. They can stand alone. You can make a whole quilt out of one pre-cut, especially out of a jelly roll, out of the charms, whatever. You can make a whole quilt out of it. You can combine them with other pre-cuts. So now you've got multiple pre-cuts in your quilt. You can cut them up as needed. They also play well with your fats, your stash, your yardage. I actually tell people, don't just use the pre-cut. Throw in some fabrics out of your stash because that gives variety and depth to the quilt. When a manufacturer does their fabrics, the dyes are basically all the same in a collection. So you aren't getting that nice depth and variation in fabric tones and colors. So I like to throw in a few fabrics from different manufacturers to pop the quilt. And you can just be very, very creative. If you look at the quilt behind me here on the wall, it's made up by 2.5 inch squares, 2.5 by 3.5 inch patches. So those are perfect for mini charms and jelly rolls. So I could substitute those in this quilt and then cut the rest strip quilt, because the rest of the patches are 3.5 inch squares and 5.5 inch squares. To get the 5.5 inch square out of the 10 inch charm, or rather layer cake, it would be wasting too much fabric and it's too much work. The 3.5 inch square, okay, I can cut those pretty easily out of those 5 inch squares. If I really, really, really want to use those fabrics and didn't want to buy the yardage. But to be honest, I think it's faster and easier to just strip cut those. But I'm going to be saving a lot of time not cutting those 2.5 inch squares and the 2.5s by 3.5. So I'd grab some mini charms, I'd grab jelly roll, I'm good to go. And then I'd probably grab a solid jelly roll to do the binding. Now, your manufacturers are great at helping to spark ideas, and you really need to rely on them. And this is an example. Moda, on the back of their layer cake, offers cutting diagrams to give you ideas on how to cut these and use them for different patches. They also have come out with several books that are devoted just to pre-cuts. Timeless Treasures, they provide patterns with their Tonga treats, and other manufacturers also offer free patterns.
All right, now we've got kind of an overview on pre-cuts. What would you suggest would be the best ways to utilize these pre-cuts when you're working on your own quilts?
Well, especially, when you're just getting started, or, if you've never really used them before, I love to use them for little tiny mini quilts, when we have like the 12-inch, 18 by 20-inch little wall quilts or mat quilts that we like. They're great for that. They're wonderful for Christmas ornaments and stockings because they're small pieces. They're already cut, and you can get your projects done pretty quickly. The jelly roll is wonderful if you want to do like a strip pieced stocking. It goes together lickety split. So yeah, I find that Christmas things are a great thing to use the pre-cuts for. They're great for table runners and placemats. I really like using them on smaller quilts like baby and lap quilts. I already told you about the sashings. They're wonderful for piece bindings because you've got several different colors or fabrics in there. And if you want that multiple look fabric binding, just pick up a jelly roll. It'll be great. It's also good for if it's the solid one, using it for the solid jelly roll for your bindings, because these are cut at 2.5, which is a nice size for a binding. Now, personally, I like to do a 2.25 inch cut for my binding. I like my binding packed in and tighter. So it's still worth it to me because I'm just trimming off 1/4 inch. It's not that big of a deal. And it's, sometimes when we go all the way across the folded fabric, we get that little waviness in there. With the jelly rolls, we don't get that. Every piece is perfectly straight. So it's pretty easy to go through and cut the 1/4 inch off. I love these for piano bindings or borders. Piano borders are one of my favorite things to do on a quilt. And jelly roll to the rescue. Just cut however long a length you need, usually about, I think I usually do about either 5.5 or 6.5, depending on how wide I want, and just cut those off and you're good to go. And they're very, very easy to incorporate with all your rotary cut fabrics. So I just find that the list goes on and on and on. You're only limited by your imagination.
All right, I do want to tie this back a little bit. I know when we started out, one of the things we were considering was money, one of the M's that we talked about early. So aren't pre-cuts a little expensive? What would you have to say to that?
Oh, yeah, I just get going and I'm all excited and you bring me back to earth with a darn budget. That's not fair. You're right. Your pre-cuts are going to generally be more expensive. Okay, I can't lie to you. They are going to cost a little more, but some things are priceless. Precision cutting and precision piecing that you get from the precision cuts, to me, that's priceless, especially depending on the type of quilt that you're doing. Time is money. Bottom line, time is money. And only you can decide on how much it's worth. If I don't have a lot of time to quilt, it's worth it to me to pay a little extra for a pre-cut if it means I'm going to get in there and actually do some quilting. I'll save time not just in cutting, but in avoiding frustration with poorly pieced blocks or a patch where I find I didn't cut it quite right and I've got to recut it. There's typically less fabric waste, so you aren't going to have to deal with leftovers. I've got so much leftover fabric, I'll never use it in my entire lifetime. So in some ways, I'm better off just buying a pre-cut. But if I do have leftovers, I can always make my own pre-cuts. I cut my leftover fabric into either strips or squares. And I'm just ready to go. So have a cutting party with your friends or your guild, or swap with them. Everybody cuts their fabric and swaps. The principle's the same. Your fabric's ready to go when you are, and you save money in the process.
And what would you
So
say?
go ahead. Oh, but I will give one tip here. If you are going to pre-cut your fabric or cut your fabric after your quilting, make sure the quilt is 100% finished, because if you cut your strips while you're cutting out, or you cut the squares while you're cutting out the pieces you need for your quilt, invariably something's going to go wrong and now you won't have enough fabric to cut a new piece. So wait till that quilt is totally done.
And then what would the best way to get started with pre-cuts be, according to you, ZJ?
I'm a book person. So for me, I love books and magazines for inspiration. They're my weakness. There are a ton of really great ones out there that are dedicated to pre-cuts in general, that'll cover all the different pre-cuts. And there's also some for specific pre-cuts. And also the ones by the manufacturers that talk about their pre-cuts. So I've actually added quite a large selection to my personal library that are dedicated just to pre-cuts. I'm old school. I know you can download things and look at things online, but I really like the feel of a book, being able to mark a page, flip through it, especially late at night, or if I'm in bed in the morning having a cup of tea or something, I like to grab a book. So that's where I'd start.
Now, I can agree with you there. I also like the feel of a book in my hands, but I do see, ZJ, that you have put together a list of books that you like to recommend. Would you like to talk about that and where people might be able to find that?
You should be able to download it. It should be right there with the slide pack. And I think I've got probably a good 10 to 12 different books there for you. There's some of my favorites, and I hope you'll look for them, and they'll give you the inspiration that I found.
Amazing. And then people can get whatever copy they prefer. Some people are ebook readers, and that's fine. But those of people that are like you and me can go get those books and have them in hand. ZJ, if you don't mind, there's one question that I'd like to get to with the small amount of time we have left. Is there anything else you wanted to touch base on before I ask that for you?
Not really. I just found that, I know that management doesn't sound like something that goes with quilting, but I'll tell you what, it's really helped me manage my time and my budget a little bit better, and I've been able to increase my output of quilts, and that's the big goal. So I hope I've given you guys some ideas, and that it wasn't too technical, that you'll understand those principles of management can work anywhere. So I just hope you'll use them and get to quilting. That's what it's all about.
All right, before we officially say goodbye, like I said, there's one question in here. There are a lot of group notes and suggestions and things, crowdsourcing information in the chat box, so make sure you do check that out if you haven't looked there already. But I wanted to ask Gina's question. So Gina wants to know, how did all of the pre-cut fabrics get the cute names? Honey buns, layer cakes, jelly rolls, everything sounds delicious. ZJ, do you know where those came from?
Beats the heck out of me. I think Moda just had probably some real creative brainstorming marketing sessions and came up with it. And they know that quilters usually like food, and food is appealing. So who can resist a layer cake or a honey bun or a charm? I mean, I think they're great names. They're really cute. And the other manufacturers have really good names too, you know. So you need to check into those. I don't know the history, but it is fun. What a great question.
I thought it was fun as well. Well, ZJ, before I say our farewells, is there anything else you would like to leave our viewers with?
I will put a plug in. I did several years ago a class for TN marketing that was on designing your perfect quilting sewing studio, that if you're looking for ways to enhance your space, might give you some ideas. I also did a class on jelly rolls, and there's some patterns in there, and also the one on the pre-cuts. I go into a lot more of the technical aspects of them and give you a lot more ideas. So if that's something that somebody's interested in, those are out there to help you out as well.
Oh, that's amazing. And as always, we thank everybody for joining us. The links that ZJ was mentioning, as well as the information for the slideshow that she provided and the class that was mentioned today, those are all to be found either in the description of the video or in the chat box of today's video. This is also a video that you can come back to in the future. So if there's anything you want to revisit, just come back to this link. This video is going to be here for you to revisit. And again, this is National Craft Month, so we had to celebrate today with ZJ Humbach talking us through some no more excuses. Thank you so much for joining us, CJ.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I just hope everybody has fun, and if it's the month to do stuff, then by golly, get those machines going.
Indeed, and thank you to everybody for joining us. We so appreciate you watching with us. On behalf of Craftsy and our entire team, my name is Leah. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time.